Welcome to Database Management System series of video lectures. Today we are discussing Unit 1, Topic 6, Structure of a Database Management System. So here is the structure of a database management system. There are many components that have been subcategorized into various other levels. Let us look at three different levels. The bottommost one is called as the actual database. Within the database, how the data is being stored can be explained by these components. Second is the storage manager. How the data is being stored, what to be accessed, and how this data can be given provision to be accessed by any users is done by storage manager. Third is query processor. Depending upon the query or the question which are made by the users, how the data is being accessible is done by the query processor. Fourth is at the user level. Okay. So on the whole, we have four different levels which have to be used to understand the structure of a database management system. Now, look at the bottommost level, that is the actual or physical database. Okay. So here the data is going to be stored. Now, this data should be maintained in a structure manner for storing all the data. At which particular memory location the data is being stored can be retrieved from the data dictionary. Data dictionary is used for retrieving the detailed information about at which particular memory location the data is stored. All the address information can be maintained from the data dictionary. So we will be able to access to that particular data. Data about data can be maintained from the data dictionary. Indices are used in order to access to the memory location where the required data is available. So index information, here we maintain a separate data structure which will maintain the index for each and every data element. And the fourth component here is statistical data. So we will maintain a record keeping that which table of entities or which data items have been accessed for how many times. So this statistical information will help the processor to have a better accessing of the data from one place to the other place. So this is all about the bottom level, that is the physical database. The second one is storage manager. In storage manager, we have four different components. One is buffer manager, file manager, authorization and integrity manager, transaction manager. Buffer manager can be used for storing the data for a temporary basis, which can be swapped from the actual disk storage to the physical RAM memory. So the swapping in and swapping out can be done by the buffer manager. What kind of data that is required by the user can be first retrieved from the disk storage onto the buffer manager, and from there it can be transferred to the physical RAM memory so that the processor does the execution. The second component is file manager. File manager maintains the detailed information about how many files that have been created, how many files that are available on the disk storage. Each and every file that is stored at which memory block can also be maintained in the file manager. And how many number of times this file has been accessed, the number of attempts that has been made. So every detailed information about the files are maintained in the file manager. The third component here is authorization and integrity manager. Authorization here plays a vital role. Not all the users have given the accessibility to the data which is being stored on the disk storage. Instead, only the authorized users who have got the correct privileges or the correct permissions are allowed to access. So this can be identified by the credentials. And also, depending upon the type of user, the accessibility can be given to them. And the second component here is integrity management. Whatever may be the changes that are made by the users should also be reflected in the underlying memory level. So this is also done by the authorization and integrity manager. What is being accessed should the same thing that should be reflected in the database. And the last component in storage manager is transaction manager. So transaction here is a basic unit of execution. So anyway, we discuss about this as transaction manager in detail as part of unit 3. But then for the time being, let us try to understand a transaction is a basic unit of execution. If you wanted to read the data from the database, a read operation is being used. So this can be treated as one transaction. Writing some data or modifying the data element in the database can be treated as the second transaction. So similarly, there can be multiple number of transactions that may take place. So all these transactions will be given with a unique ID number, which is being generated by the transaction manager for the maintenance of integrity and consistency of the database. So this is all about storage manager. And the third component is query processor. Query processor itself reads the query or the question that is made by the user and it tries to execute that. To do this, we have various other components here. The first one is application program object code. So this helps us to access to the application through which the users are interacting. So there can be different types of users who are accessing to the data, right? Every user can be using an interface through which the actual data can be accessible. Now, every user have been subcategorized into four. The first type of users are called as naive users. They are web users, agents, and tellers. Naive users will not have any technical knowledge about the data which is being stored and what should be done with the help of that data. Second type of users are application programmers. Application programmers do not have any underlying architectural details, but then they will be able to deal with only how the data should be given and how it should be stored and in what way it can be accessible. So application programmers are just meant to develop the applications, but not to design how the data to be stored. So these application programmers will be able to access through the interface called as application program. And the third type of users are called as sophisticated users or the analysts. So these types of users have the equal amount of knowledge about the applications which are being used and how the data is being stored in the database. And these types of users will be able to use various query tools which are available in the market through which they will be able to directly act upon the physical data storage area. And the fourth type of users are called as database administrators or in short DBAs. DBAs have the central control over the actual database. How many types of users that are given accessibility to the data, up to what privilege the data should be accessible, whether it is for read level or for write level or for the execute level. All these are going to be defined by the DBA. So database administrator will be created with the help of various administration tools. So this database administrator will have the total control over the data and who are allowed to access and what can be the manipulations and the changes that are allowed depending upon the type of user, the roles, the operations are given at a different ways. So this is the actual structure of the database management system. Now we start from the top level now. You being a naive user will make a request to see what is the content in the student database. Okay. So in that case, you will be able to use an interface. An interface could be a browser through which you are interacting. And this browser will interpret what kind of request that is being made by the user, which is given to the query evaluation engine. Query evaluation engine will read what is the query which is asked by the user. right? The query processor will first hand over this to query evaluation engine. Now, this query is being tokenized. Let us come back here. This query is tokenized into various parts, and this process is called as parsing the query and translating or converting into equivalent machine code. Okay, so now this query is taken as an input to the parser and the translator, which breaks down the whole query into various tokens, and it will extract, are there any relational algebra operators that are used? If that is so, it will try to reduce or optimize the execution sequence. And optimizer will always look at the statistical data that have we done or have we executed similar kind of operation earlier, or have we accessed to this particular data element earlier. All these are the various informations which are being collected in the background in order to execute further, because we wanted to reduce the execution time in the execution engine, right? And then this is handed over to the machine equivalent query is handed over to the evaluation engine, which does the execution, which will act up, which will retrieve the data from the database, which does the execution, and finally constructs or retrieves the output. So this output is called as query output. So this is how the query processor does the conversion from high level commands to the low level commands. And then with respect to the query processor, it uses various other types of processors. One is DDL processor, query processor, DML processor, processor, query optimizer. DDL processor means data definition language processor. We have various commands that are used in order to interact with the database. So we use a SQL language, that is structured query language, which contains a group of commands which are subcategorized into DDL, DML, DCL, and TCL commands. So data definition language commands are used, then this processor does the parsing of it, which does the conversion of high level or user level commands into low level commands, so that the machine will be able to understand what can be the operation to be done. And then query processor breaks down the query and then will try to act upon the physical data items which are stored in the database. DML processor also does the similar kind of operation as DTL. DML stands for data manipulation language commands. So when a query is framed upon data manipulation language commands, this processor will take the operation in converting high level language command into low-level language commands. Command processor will read all the commands and it does the conversion from machine equivalent code. And once the machine equivalent code is available, we can hand over to the query engine for further execution. But then before that, the query optimizer is used to efficiently execute the given transaction or the given command. And the next one is storage manager. We have already discussed about storage manager and disk storage. And we have types of users, database administrators who have the central control over the whole database, the users, and then programmers. Users are the named users who do not have any action to be taken upon the data, simply retrieves the data and then will be able to present it to the screen. And then programmers does the actual link from one data element to the other data element. We will be able to develop the programs for accessing the data from one database to the other. So this is how the structure of our database management system is explained. Thank you.